webinar. And this webinar is hosted by the Consumer Information Programme of the One Planet Network, bringing together experts and authorities in consumer protection, environmental sustainability, and regulatory compliance. So we're very much looking to help raise better understanding of the prevalence of greenwashing in the marketplace and its impact on consumer choices and the environment, as well as explore the solutions, the regulatory solutions to combat misleading environmental claims, and to empower each of you to take informed action so we can promote transparency and marketing free from misleading claims in the marketplace. I'm delighted to gather so many people for this very popular webinar today, and we're joined by a fascinating panel of diverse experts to take us through the various challenges that we have. We do have some slides to present to give an overview of the work that is underway within the Consumer Information Programme. I'm just wondering if someone is able to either share those slides or give me the ability to share them from my end. Mylis, do you have those slides, or are you able to give me the sharing screen ability?
Yes, of course, you should be able now to present your slides.
Great. Is that coming up for everyone? Fantastic.
Yes, perfect.
Fantastic. So this work of the UN One Planet Network is a multi-stakeholder initiative to drive forward action on sustainable consumption and production. It is a partnership established by the UN to generate that particular drive to advance the Sustainable Development Goal 12. And in fact, it is an implementation mechanism for SDG target 12.1 to implement this 10-year framework for programs on sustainable consumption and production, as well as contribute to other sustainable consumption goals that are within the SDGs. The work is delivered through 6 programs of work covering food systems, lifestyles and education, buildings and construction, consumer information, public procurement, and tourism. And the work brings together governments, local authorities, businesses, civil society, scientific organizations, international institutions to drive those partnerships and collaborative action for the delivery of the SDGs. The work of the Consumer Information Programme, so one of the programs within the 10 YFP of the One Planet Network, is setting out to ensure that the provision of information in the marketplace is both credible and consistent, and that it can drive better action, better buy-in and support towards supporting consumers to engage in sustainable consumption. The work has an aspirational target of working towards companies providing credible sustainability information across at least half of their products in the marketplace, products and services, I should say, at that point of sale. The work is overseen by 3 co-leaders. So there's the German government, in particular, the Federal Ministry of the Environment, Nature, Conservation, Nuclear Safety and Consumer Protection. There is the other co-lead is UNCTAD, so the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And the last co-lead is Consumers International, the organization that I am from. And we are the umbrella organization of consumer advocacy groups all across the world. We have over 200 members in over 100 countries. But the work is advanced by a steering group, a multi-stakeholder advisory group, who are driving action all across the world and representative of different geographies, as you can see on this slide here. And in addition to that multi-stakeholder advisory group, we have many partners supporting this work, from governments to businesses to civil society to other expert organizations, all driving action towards providing credible sustainability information in the marketplace. And the work is delivered through 4 particular working groups. These working groups cover product sustainability information, and our flagship piece of work is the guidelines for providing product sustainability information, which outlines 10 principles for the provision of credible sustainability information in the marketplace that we encourage businesses to take on, and for governments to endorse in their policies. Another working group on type 1 eco-labels is to drive capacity building, knowledge exchange and proliferation of type 1 eco-labels in the marketplace. The third working group is on product lifetime extension to advance a more circular economy. And the last working group is on biodiversity and biodiversity communication in particular, to really provide the mechanisms, the toolkits necessary to better communicate on biodiversity impacts of consumption. So there is a huge amount of fascinating work underway within the program, and I encourage all of you to join, get in touch with us, sign up to the newsletter and participate in this incredibly important work to drive forward. I will now pass on to Letitia from the United Nations Environment Programme to take us through more detail on the policy recommendations for tackling misleading green claims.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. I hope you can see the presentation in full screen. So yes, today we're here also to launch a publication we've been working on regulatory frameworks to combat greenwashing. So first, I will give you a bit of history of why we came there to this publication. The first thing we did was back in 2017, and we developed the guidelines for providing product sustainability information through the consumer information program that Peter introduced just now. So without entering into a lot of details, these guidelines is based on 10 principles. We have the fundamental principles that you can see on the screen now, and desirable principles. And this was done in partnership with the Consumer Information Program, with the key stakeholders, and I think we can say it was really successful. And based on this framework, many publication, this publication, let's say, had many babies, and you can see on the screen some of them. Some were led by UNEP, but by other entities, showing also the importance of having a shared framework for analysis. And we had topics such as chemicals of concerns, plastic, textile, with a publication on fashion, so many interesting topics. We trained many businesses, many companies with these guidelines, but obviously we're not able to reach the world, all the companies in the world. So to keep progressing and to keep reaching out to entities, we developed this online tool, the Green Marketing Challenge, which is kind of a game based on the guidelines. The audience for this is marketing professionals, and we wanted to raise awareness on how they can make sure that their green claim is a credible green claim and it's not greenwashing. And this was done in partnership with the UN Staff College, and it was one of the most successful online training they had. So I also invite you to have a look at this training, and we'll put in the chat, if it's not already done, the link to this training. So once again, we had first these guidelines, we trained businesses, we applied these guidelines to specific sectors and so on. We had this, the green marketing challenge. But if we want to have an impact at the global level, we need also to work on the enforcement of those ideas and how to combat greenwashing. And this is when we came with this publication, Regulatory Framework to Combat Greenwashing, to support governments into strengthening their regulation. And here I want to thank the two authors, Beatrice Parens and Elise Grou, who have been working on this publication. I'm not sure they are assisting to this webinar, but allow me to thank them here. So now I will go into more details into this publication. So how we worked on this? First, we analyzed 11 countries, and you can see them on the screen. Obviously, it's only 11 countries. We cannot say it's representative of the world, but we try to pick countries from all continents. We missed Oceania, but we have countries from North America, South America, Europe, Northern Europe, Eastern Europe, Asia, Africa. So we try to have this geographical representativity, and also to pick legislation with civil law and common law, to see also how they would work on this topic on greenwashing. So first, we group, let's say, the countries in those 4 levels that you can see on the screen. So most countries are in level 1, which are countries who have something on my screen just popped up. Sorry. So the first level is countries that have a general consumer law to combat false or misleading publicity, but this law, it's not specifically making a reference to environmental topics. It's a general law that basically insist on the fact that advertising needs to be true, and there cannot be false information in an advertising. But once again, it does not apply specifically to the environment. So level 1. Level 2 here is, we can see countries that, in addition to this general law, have guidelines that are non-binding. And here I put on the screen the guideline that was developed within the Consumer Information Program, and the one that we are really lucky today of having Andrea Vega from Indecopy, that will speak about the experience of Peru in developing their own guideline. So this is an additional layer, I would say, of stringency. Then we have level 3, and in level 3, we have countries that have a binding law that is making specific reference to environmental aspects. And here on the screen, you can see the example of Korea. I highlighted some of the aspects of the law that seem to me more relevant, but as you can see, this act is embedded into a reflection for a green economy, for a sustainable national development. So it's really aligned. They make specific reference to the environmental topics. Something that is interesting in Korea is that businesses are allowed, with their green claims, to go to the government and ask them if they approve this green claim, so that before it's publicly available, they can have this approval from the Ministry of Environment to make sure they are not falling into greenwashing. They have clear sanction. So one obviously would be to change the green claim and to make it public that the green claim was misleading one, also with fine, and it's 2% of the turnover, which can be a lot for some businesses. And in case there is no access to this information, the amount of the fine is 500 million won, which is roughly 350,000 US dollars. Just so this would be level 3. And then we have level 4. And in level 4, here we have countries that make it mandatory to all businesses to inform about the sustainability of their products and the impact on the environment. And here you can see the case of France. And here I also highlighted that the information, to share information on the impact is made compulsory. And I added here as an example the index of reparability that is mandatory in France since 2021. It only applies to specific sectors, and you can see them. You have smartphones, computers, etc. And below, at the bottom of the screen, you can see how it looks like. So you have different grades and different colors, and it helps consumers to identify which one are the products that are more reparable. But what is really interesting here is that whether you are doing well or you are doing bad, you need to inform. And here we only have a few countries. So I gave France as an example. The European Union also is leading on this topic, and we are really happy to have them here in this discussion. So what I presented so far are those different levels of legislation with an increased stringency on each one of them. Now I will give a bit more of information of what countries can do to strengthen their legislation. So most countries are on the gray area at the back, you can see. So most countries have this general law to combat misleading advertising. So once they are here, what they can do is what Peru has chosen to do, is to develop interpretative guidance specifically on environmental aspects. So this is option 1. What can be done also, as I explained, is to, in their law, in their binding law, include specific reference to environmental allegations. This makes it much more it's then easier to apply those rules in the country if they're included in the law. Then something that we have seen also is in certain law is that they forbid the use of vague environmental terms such as carbon neutral. We were hearing a lot those terminology, net zero, near zero, carbon neutral. It's something that it's really hard to justify. So some countries forbid the use of this term if it's not clearly, specifically explained why with data and numbers. Another one is, for example, sustainable products. Those kind of vague terminology are forbidden. Another aspect that has been implemented also, for example, in France, is to ban publicity for products that have a clear negative impact on the environment. And for example, in France, it's forbidden to have an advertising on fuel or in SUV, in those huge cars that have a huge environmental impact. And this has been agreed, and it will be implemented, if I'm not mistaken, in 2028. Perhaps, I'm sorry if it's not the right date, but it has already been approved to ban this kind of publicity. What can countries do to strengthen their regulation? So first, we recommend to analyze the national context and to define clear objectives to see what they want to achieve. Another option that is available at the national level is to have strong eco-labels, because with an eco-label, you have a claim that is third-party certified, which makes it really credible. So this is also an option to have this strong eco-label at the national level. Then companies should facilitate access to the data and methodologies they use. So if they make a green claim, then an entity needs to be allowed to have access to the information that supports this green claim. And something also that is really important is that any green claims need to be based on a life cycle approach. And what we mean here is that too often self-declared claims are based on only one aspect. Like say the packaging is biodegradable. Well, that's fine, but perhaps the main impact it's not related to the packaging, but rather to the emission of CO2 or the use of chemicals of concern within a specific product. So this life cycle approach is key to really identify what are the main impacts of each specific product. Then also on the more institutional level, it's important to have a strong national authorities that will be allowed to apply administrative sanction, but also to have the capacity to review all the claims that exist that are published. So this is also a huge work for them, and those institutions needs to be strengthened. Then it is also important to have a diversified system of sanctions, knowing that we have 50 shades of greenwashing, I would say. So it's not the same if the company really lies on purpose or is just doing, I'm saying just doing, but is doing a vague claim. So this is why it needs to be also proportionate, the sanction. This is something important. And finally, what seems really important based on what we have seen is that this reflection needs to be based on the whole of a society approach. This means that obviously government should be involved, but also the private sector, civil society, the academicians, everyone need to work together so that as a society we agree together on the information that needs to reach the consumer. And we here we'll stop. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be happy to answer any question in the chat. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Laetitia. We're now going to move on to a panel discussion, bringing to life how regulatory frameworks around the world can and do help to fight greenwashing. My name is Cecilia Parker Arana. I'm a director at the UK's Competition and Markets Authority, which, among other things, has responsibility for enforcing consumer protection law in the UK. Back in 2020, we launched a programme of work to tackle greenwashing. We published our Green Claims Code in 2021. It sets out 6 principles for businesses to follow so that they can avoid greenwashing and communicate environmental information to consumers honestly. We have since opened enforcement investigations to examine the conduct of businesses in the fashion and fast-moving consumer goods sectors. And at the same time, we've made recommendations to the UK government to strengthen consumer protection law as it relates to green claims. This is a topic that's very close to my heart, and I strongly believe that regulation, and the right regulation, has a significant role to play both in preventing greenwashing and ensuring that consumers have the information they need to make positive choices for the environment. So I'm delighted now to introduce and learn from an experienced and diverse panel of people working in this space. You've already met Peter Andrews, who's the Director of Consumer Rights, Innovation and Impact at Consumers International. As part of the Consumers International leadership team, he's responsible for developing and delivering innovative and impactful programs on issues facing consumers relating to sustainable consumption, food, energy, product safety, and a wide range of consumer insights. We have Małgorzata Gojebiewska. She's a team leader at in the environmental footprint and green claims team at the General for the Environment at the European Commission. She's responsible for preparations and negotiations on the Green Claims Directive and has been working on EU environment and climate policy development and implementation within the Commission since 2008. We have Felipe Sefrin. Felipe is the communications coordinator at Acatu Institute, a Brazilian NGO that has been working for over 20 years to mobilize society towards conscious consumption and sustainability. Felipe is a journalist specialized in strategic communication and is a participant in Harvard's Manage Mentor program. He's also written for several Brazilian media companies in the last 15 years and works with the cause of conscious consumption since 2000. Andrea Vega is a senior legal officer at Indecopi, Peru, and she's in charge of the investigation of investigations at the forefront of digital advertising, including influencer marketer and fictitious discounts, and also for misleading environmental claims. And finally, we have Danica Riadini-Flesch, who's the founder and CEO of Sukacita, an award-winning social enterprise that changes lives in rural Indonesia, working directly with craftswomen and smallholder farmers. She's pioneering a new way of making clothes, from introducing natural dyes to rediscovering indigenous wisdom to grow the cotton regeneratively. And she's a trained economist who has built one of the world's first farm-to-closet supply chains. So now that we've done introductions, Andrea, I'd like to start with you. So Peru launched its own guidelines on environmental claims last year as part of its educational initiatives for consumers and businesses. It was based on the principles of the guidelines for providing product sustainability information that we've talked about. Could you tell us why it's important for a country to have their own national guidelines?
Yes, thank you very much, Cecilia. First, on behalf of Indecopi, we're honored to have been invited by the United Nations and One Planet Network to share the work we have done from Indecopi to prevent greenwashing. So following your question, we believe that since countries have different legal frameworks, they have different spaces for enforcement actions. So we believe it's not only important, but it's also beneficial for countries and authorities to have their own national guidelines. I will mention 3 types of benefits we have identified: benefits for consumers and the environment, benefits for each of the authorities and countries, and finally, benefits for businesses. On the benefits for consumers, we have identified that it helps reduce misleading green claims that generate a false expectative for consumers by having clear and delimited standards. It also promotes consumer trust, which we believe is very important in today's world, in the work your country and authority is doing, and also on the green claims, reducing the possibility that consumers are harmed or misled. And finally, it generates transparency regarding the real characteristics of the positive impact of products and services on the environment, allowing consumers to take better informed decisions. Second, the benefits for each of the authorities and countries. We believe that first, it helps position your institution, your authority, and country as a leader on this topic that other countries can look up to. We believe this is a good practice that should be replicated in other countries. Second, it helps position your country in the commitment with the Sustainable Development Goals set by the United Nations, as it was mentioned in the presentations before. And third, by having clear standards, it helps reduce the time of processing investigations and cases. Therefore, it can reduce the workload on this matter in your institutions. And finally, there are also benefits for businesses, which is very important. It penalizes environmental claims that are misleading and that generate economic benefits to those businesses that act unfair, damaging fair competitors. And it also allows and assures that advertising with environmental claims is an efficient mechanism for businesses to compete on the market, which is especially benefit for entrepreneurs. So those are the benefits we have identified. We believe it is very important that as authorities, we promote the release of these green claims guidelines, so other authorities can look up to. So we have this good practice in Peru, so we aspire that probably other countries in Latin America and in the world can as well elaborate their own guidelines, and count on us for any help you may need. We will, after this question, we will develop on the process that we made to elaborate our guidelines. So that will be it for now. I remain at disposal for the next question.
Thanks, Andrea. So you mentioned the importance of sharing these guidelines with other authorities, but can you talk about how you're working on disseminating the guidance, how you're reaching your target audience?
Yes, of course. Well, first I would like to talk about the process that we made to elaborate our guidelines. I have a small visual I would like to share just for people to have it of reference, but I can start talking about it. What we did and what we focused on was in a participative process. We believe it's very important to involve important stakeholders in the elaboration of these guidelines. So what we did, it was making them part of the publication. So we opened the draft for everyone and had a very good response. What we did, we started the supervision in 2020 to 2022. We had over 800 investigations, and we started the elaboration of the draft guidelines on 2022. We had a pre-publication of the draft on April 2023. We had a period of open consultation, which we believe is very important in this matter, so people and important stakeholders can feel involved in the process of making these guidelines. So we had over 1 month of open consultation, and we received 7 comments from 7 entities. And after that, we held meetings with consumers associations, with Ministry of Environment, with the business industry. So we had a diverse type of comments and suggestions, and we incorporated those comments and suggestions on September 2023 to finally release the final version of our publication on October 2023. So regarding the dissemination of this guideline, what we are doing now is we are having an informative and educational strategy that is mainly composed of 3 things. The first one is the use of informative letters. The second one is trainings and webinars. And finally, press releases. So in informative letters, what we do is in the scope of our supervision and for disseminating these guidelines, we have sent and we keep sending informative letters to businesses that use environmental claims in order to remind them of their obligations and to share with them the guidelines in which they can find recommendations and concrete examples of how to advertise their claims. It is very important for us that they have an example to look, because it's not only big businesses that do green claims in Peru, there are also small ones. So that will be the first one, informative letters. The second one would be trainings and webinars. During the period of consultation, we had working meetings with industry representatives who sent comments to the draft guidelines. And after the official release of the guidelines, we also hold trainings to associates from ANDA, which is the National Association of Advertisers in Peru. They reach to a wider audience of businesses. So we believe it is very important to reach specific associations, consumer associations, business associations, so they can spread the word to their contacts. So we have meetings with consumer associations as well, in which environmental related associations attended. We also believe that influencers are important stakeholders who advertise green claims nowadays, and that need to be informed about the guidelines. They also reach to a very wide audience, so we believe we can reach out to them. And finally, in the press releases, we have used the press releases, and in most of these are related to advertising in general, and the work we do in ISPEN as well, for example. So on behalf of Indecopy, we share the link of the guidelines on environmental claims to reach a wider audience. These press releases are also shared on our social media and channels such Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So one recommendation I could give to other authorities and countries is to use their channels. People sometimes look more to social media than websites, for example. So it's important that if you have the channels, you have the social media, use them to inform your stakeholders.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Malgorzata, if I can move on to the European Commission, there's been lots of exciting new legislation coming out of the Commission, the Green Claims Directive and the new directive on empowering consumers for the green transition. How is the European Consumer Protection Framework changing to fight greenwashing and help consumers make sustainable choices?
Thank you, Cecilia, and good afternoon to all. Thank you for having me on the panel today. Indeed, the European legal framework is actually changing quite rapidly since the European Commission proposed the European Green Deal, which is a comprehensive strategy to transform the EU into a climate neutral, resource efficient, and clean circular economy. It has been clear that to deliver on these objectives, we actually need to rethink a number of EU policies, and among them also on production and more sustainable consumption. And here, the two key important legislative initiatives that you have just named, Cecilia, is the Empowering Consumers for the Green Transition, which amends the existing Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. And specifically, this amendment is very close to finalization now, and it will actually regulate greenwashing in more detail, specifically by indicating the situations, the cases where certain practices should be banned in all circumstances, and making unsubstantiated environmental claims will be banned. In addition, that law will require that any voluntary sustainability labels are third-party certified, which will ensure the necessary transparency and credibility. An important development that may be interesting for all is that the new law will actually forbid vague environmental claims, so generic claims like green, environmentally friendly, even a claim like biodegradable, if not specified further, may be considered as too generic and therefore not clear enough for consumers. In addition, the law will actually ban making claims that products are climate neutral or carbon positive based on greenhouse gas emissions offsetting projects outside their value chain. And here the rationale for this ban is that consumers often believe that such claims relate to the product itself or to the supply and production of that product, giving the false impression to consumers that the consumption of that product does not have environmental impact, which of course is not the case. So companies will no longer be able to make such claims in relation to products. They can still make such claims in relation to organizations themselves, but pending, of course, transparent communication about the use of carbon offsets. In addition, the law will require that when claims relate to future environmental performance, and climate-related claims often do, for example, announcing transition of a company to climate neutrality by certain date. In such case, the new law will require that companies make such claims only if they have a detailed implementation plan, when that plan is checked by independent third-party experts, and when they actually have to regularly publish how they're achieving the targets that should lead them to implement full implementation of that claim. But the Commission also proposed an additional law to complement this, so the so-called Green Claims Directive, which is currently still a proposal. It's being negotiated between the European Parliament and the Council. And it's fully complementary, meaning that it focuses only on environmental claims, while the other law looked at sustainability claims more widely. And this law will actually set more specific rules on how claims should be substantiated. So how can companies prove that the claims, environmental claims they're making are true to the facts? And notably, we're setting requirements, we're proposing to set requirements that any substantiation should be based on widely recognized scientific evidence and take into account the existing relevant international standards developed by international standardization bodies. The assessment should also prove that the environmental impacts or aspects that are subject to the claim are significant from a life cycle perspective. So we are here introducing the requirement that any claims should be proven, taking into account all the relevant stages within the life cycle of products. In addition, the assessment should help identify whether there are significant trade-offs between environmental impacts, because of course you can claim an environmental benefit in one area, but that can lead to trade-offs. Now, a claim can still be made if these trade-offs occur. However, the overall environmental benefit should be positive, and this is already actually required under the consumer protection law we have in place, but here for the first time we have very specific concrete rules how to prove this. And finally, we also are setting additional requirements on the accuracy of the data that is used, including use of primary data, so company-specific data, whenever that's available to the company, and also representative secondary data, so sectoral data or average data. The real novelty we are introducing with this proposal is the so-called ex-ante verification mechanism. This means that before a claim is made by companies, that substantiation will have to be verified and certified as compliant with the rules by an independent and accredited verifier. And that verifier will also be able to issue a certificate of conformity of the claim that will have to always accompany the claim, usually via a QR code or a web link, so that at any time a claim can be checked whether the substantiation behind the claim was verified. And there will also be a requirement on a publication of the substantiation documents. And finally, the Green Claims proposal also sets new requirements on the governance of labeling schemes. We have already heard that the other proposal that is adopted now will require that all labels are based on certification schemes. We are actually adding additional requirements that any labeling scheme has to meet to, first of all, ensure that it's independent. The scheme is independent from the producers that label their own products. In addition, we will require transparency on the criteria underlying the labels and also on the ownership of the labeling schemes. We require that relevant stakeholders are consulted when the criteria are developed, and that, of course, the third party verified, as we heard before. So these two self-standing complementary instruments are fully complementary, reinforce each other in the fight against greenwashing. So we do hope that it will be a big change when it comes to fight against greenwashing once we have both instruments in place.
Thank you very much. And those aren't the only initiatives that are happening in the EU, are they? So we also have the product environmental footprint, which is about communicating that environmental impact information. There's the digital product passport, which is all about supply chains. What's the latest progress on those initiatives and how will they interact with the new legislation?
Of course, the environment footprint methods are the right methods to substantiate claims. So within the Green Claims Directive, we make it clear that companies can use these methods and their appropriate life cycle assessment methods, of course. We also made some commitments how the methods should evolve further to be more applicable to more product groups and to fully take into account different environmental impacts, such as, for example, impacts on biodiversity. The digital product passport, on the other hand, is an important development as well. It's meant to be a tool that will create transparency, unlock circularity, because it will be a digital space where information about products will be stored and could be accessible. And it will be shared across the entire value chain, including data on raw material extraction, production, recycling, etc. And of course, it remains an appropriate place to store information about the substantiation of environmental claims. So we want to make a clear link between these legal acts to really fully benefit from the potential that the digital product passport will bring. It is the initiative is still under development. We are working actually with the standardization bodies to develop a standard that will allow compatibility, common rules on accessibility of the digital product passport, making all these different technical choices within a standard to allow that all companies can use it across different countries in a harmonized manner. And finally, there are many other legal acts that will be linked to the digital product passport, because the digital product passport will mostly support legal acts that set mandatory rules on product design. So, for example, we have the eco-design for sustainable product regulation coming, batteries regulation that has already been agreed and is now entering into force, and many other legal acts that will benefit from the DPP and will link to the DPP.
Great, thank you very much. So we've heard from people making the legislation, we've heard from people enforcing the legislation. I'd like to move on now to think about the consumer perspective on all of this. And Felipe, the Acatu Institute is the Brazilian partner of Globoscan, which develops the Healthy and Sustainable Living survey on an annual basis. The 2023 survey showed that 9 out of 10 people globally express an interest in healthy and sustainable products, but there are barriers that continue to hinder those purchases, like lack of support from government and brands. How do we interpret this data as far as the communication of environmental claims is concerned?
Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you, everybody, for watching us, for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. And this is a very good question, because Acatu is working from the point of view of consumer. And by research and by our 20 years of expertise, we managed to understand more or less what the consumers want. And consumers around the world want for more sustainability. They want to be more sustainable, and they want to be healthier. But of course, that's a lot of barriers that avoid or stop these changes of living. And the first one is that the products are too much expensive, that sustainable products are expensive. And I will talk about this in a couple of minutes. But the second barrier, is that there is no support of government. The third one is that there is no support of companies. And the fourth one is that I don't know how. And we really believe that with guidelines, with frameworks, we can manage with these barriers. Because with guidelines and with frameworks, with actions, with laws, with policies, we can demonstrate that the government is showing to people that move or some transition to this healthier and more sustainable life. It's important, and you can do this. Also, when government are developing with institutions and with the consumers guidelines, frameworks, and etc., we are forcing the companies to move, because in general, companies will not change if they don't need, or if they don't see that this is necessary, or if they don't see that the consumers need or want this. Also, by guidelines and by frameworks, we are showing to consumers what to do, how to do, not just about communication, but also about education. And this attacks number 4 that I told, that's I don't know how. So with guidelines and with frameworks, with policies, with laws, we're also talking about education of consumers. And with all these 3, working with government, with companies, and with I don't know how, this is education, we also can deal with the barrier of price, because people will understand what they are buying, will understand the value of the products, the service. We will understand that maybe this product is better because he will live longer, or because he's better for my health, or because it's better for the environment. So that's why it's super important, these programs and these talks that we are having here about guidelines, about frameworks, and all this is about also to combat greenwashing.
Thank you, Felipe. And the research also shows that people are most receptive to information about a brand or product sustainability claim when it's shown directly on the product packaging. On the other hand, lots of people say it's not easy to fully understand or rely on the information that's provided. How do you think regulation can contribute to clearer sustainability information for consumers?
Yes, yes. My colleagues talked here about some laws, yes, that avoid the vague terms like organic, ecologic, green, carbon neutral, carbon zero, net zero. And really, in our research, we discovered what is obvious is that people don't know what is this. They don't know the difference of organic and ecological and green and neutral carbon. So it's super important that has the consumer really trust in the information in the labels. We developed systems that this information will be developed with more relevance, clarity, transparency, and accessibility, like the frameworks of One Planet. And Cecilia, can I show that Brazilian initiative here in the product that we talked about? Yes. I will show one very good example of Brazilian country that was not studied here in the guidelines. I will cover the brand, but probably you know what is this. Let me remove here my blur. Opa. Yes, yes, yes. I think that you know what is this.
We think we can figure it out. Yeah.
Yes. So I will not do in marketing, but here you can see that some new law that's talking. This product have too much sugar, and of course, was not the brand that decided to put this there. Was necessary some discussion and some guidelines, frameworks, policies to make all the companies with foods, beverage, and groceries wherever in Brazil to add with transparency, with clarity, with accessibility in the labels that this product it's high in sugar, it's high in sodium, or it's high in fat. So this make easier the choice of people. This is also, like I said, is a communication and it's also education, because with information, when the consumer has more information, he's able to do better choices. And I really believe that if people know that something is better than other, they will choose what's better. So that's why it's super important that the transparency in the labels, because really the consumer believes in the labels. He just don't know how to interpret so many informations. And when we have something clear like this, when we are empowering the consumer to show to them the best way, he will choose the best way.
Great, thank you very much. And Danica, your fashion brand started in 2016 with 3 women, and it now provides access to education and a living wage to more than 1,000 people in rural Indonesia. You've also got some ambitious goals that you want to achieve by 2030 that are dependent on consumer demand. How do you see the behavior and the awareness of consumers in relation to the impacts of the fashion industry? Can they react to greenwashing by fashion brands?
Thank you, Cecilia. That's a really interesting question, because we keep hearing these numbers where more and more people are aware of the negative impacts of fashion industry and are looking to support products that are more environmentally friendly. However, in the reality of almost a decade of doing this, I am not really seeing awareness turning into behavior change. For instance, I started Sucachita really with the aim of providing living wages to not just the scope 3 or really the women who stitch your clothes, but all the way to the farmers that grew it. And that has led us to get the first B Corporation certification that basically we managed to get awarded as the best for the world. And at the same time, also, we became the first and only fashion brand currently in the world to be certified ethically handcrafted by a US-based NGO in New York called Nest. Unfortunately, even with all these credentials, what we're seeing is that people are commenting that we're a beacon of hope in the industry. However, we're not really seeing other businesses following suit. And that's why I feel like the only way we can really combat greenwashing is, first of all, of course, educating the consumers, like what Felipe said, in terms of what is the origin story and the full impact of a product. Because at the end of the day, doing things right comes at a cost. And right now, people and businesses who are trying to do the right things, we're being penalized by the system. There are no incentives whatsoever that would make you want to not only just be sustainable, but actually, in our case, to start planting regeneratively in order to repair the soil. So that's why we feel like legislation is, at the end of the day, the only way you can really create industry-wide change. Because right now, if you can imagine, everyone is suddenly talking about something being ethical and sustainable, but there's really not even a clear definition. Ethical to who? By whose standard? Brands that are being sold to consumers in the EU, but then produced in countries like Indonesia. Whose standard of ethical are they following suit? And is it only looking at the tier 3, which is really like the scope that most fashion brands actually have visibility? And this is really, if you can imagine, this is where the fabric is being turned into clothes. But the reality of the matter is that the biggest environmental and social impact that you have behind a product is actually all the way in the tier 2 and 1. So without legislation, I am actually quite skeptical that the industry by itself will do the right thing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting perspective, and perhaps one that some of the authorities on the call might share with you. So with regard to regulatory frameworks adopted by governments, what would you kind of point out as the fundamental topics for them to really contribute to combating greenwashing and guiding consumer choice?
I think exactly what the European Commission is doing, exactly what needs to be done. It's really looking at the life cycle of the product, not only how it's being made, but also how it's being grown, for instance. And that's really one thing that is missing right now, is how do we justify that these sustainable or greener practices do cost more? Right now, businesses that are trying to internalize these externalities, we're absorbing the cost, and as a result, our prices are higher than the conventional extractive businesses. So adopting life cycle, the way of looking at it really through the different life cycles, like what the European Commission is doing, is exactly the right step towards that different future.
That's great. Thank you very much. And Peter, if I can come back to you now. Consumers International has been particularly focused on the issue of sustainability information in e-commerce, and you've produced a series of reports on that, which are highlighting the contribution that e-commerce marketplaces can make towards sustainable consumption. Why is it important to discuss product sustainability information specifically for e-commerce? What's the kind of current view of that showing us in terms of the challenges and opportunities for combating greenwashing and empowering consumers?
Yes, well, the challenges highlighted by many of the speakers in this webinar today on product sustainability information are exacerbated and complicated in e-commerce. We all, as consumers, think and behave differently in online environments, and in many ways, we are more vulnerable to manipulation. But the unique opportunities provided by online environments are arguably even more significant for improving the credibility of sustainability information. So there is scope for e-commerce actors to deliver information in more innovative ways that educate and motivate, as well as inform and support sustainable consumption choices at scale, as well as building the needed consumer trust in the marketplace. However, at the moment, the situation is quite challenging. A sweep of online marketplaces conducted by the International Consumer Protection Enforcement Network back in 2021 found that around 40% of sustainability claims could be misleading. And we know that these claims do matter to consumers. I think it has been touched upon that surveys indicate consumers are trying to adjust their purchasing practices to align more with environmental values, but they are finding these challenges in the marketplace. From our perspective, from Consumers International, an essential consumer right is at risk. Enshrined in the UN guidelines for consumer protection is the right to access adequate information to enable people, consumers, to make informed choices. And there are rules in many jurisdictions and many consumer laws in countries to prevent that misleading claims as an unfair form of commercial practice. But in addition, greenwashing breeds consumer skepticism. So people are losing trust in sustainability information provided by companies, irrespective of whether they are providing accurate information or misguided information. So unless we can address this, unless we can really increase the trust in the marketplace, we are not going to enable sustainable consumption amongst many, many people across the world. So it's a shared challenge, and I think businesses have a vested interest in ensure we have credible information in the marketplace. Governments do too, consumer groups and all civil society, as well as consumers, can see a huge value in this. What I would say is that there are a couple of things that e-commerce businesses can do. So firstly, collaborating to create data commons for product sustainability information. The e-commerce providers have access to huge amounts of information and a lot of influence in their marketplace to encourage more people to share information, more businesses to share information. And that way we can start building up a better data commons that all can access. In addition, e-commerce marketplaces can work better with third-party sellers and manufacturers to standardize, streamline, and verify sustainability information. I've seen in the chat many people are talking about how can we utilize standards more to support sustainable consumption and tackle misleading green claims. And I think e-commerce players can provide a really critical role there. And then also e-commerce players can also help to plan interventions that support more consumer behavior shifts online. So the choice architecture presented to consumers in the marketplace there, how can we utilize that more effectively to support sustainable consumption?
That's great, thank you. And coming back to the idea of regulatory frameworks to tackle greenwashing, can you point out that the main actions that you think regulation should work on to improve the online provision of reliable product sustainability information?
Yes, well, like the report that was presented earlier, we've conducted research that has uncovered a patchwork of policy approaches globally. Too often, sustainability information falls through the cracks between consumer, environmental, and digital policy-making agendas, and therefore more collaboration between government departments can play a really important role. We produced some work, our policy action framework for improving product sustainability information in e-commerce with the International Institute for Sustainable Development to give policymakers a holistic overview of the different ways they can promote sustainable consumption through information in that online environment. We identified that there are 5 core actions that can be undertaken and a series of more supporting ones. So firstly, to set requirements for product sustainability information. So ensuring that the provision of comprehensive and standardized product sustainability information to consumers is guaranteed. So setting out what are the product categories that need to be covered, what are the sustainability attributes and aspects that need to be addressed. Secondly, to clarify the responsibilities of different actors to ensure compliance with information requirements. So it's particularly relevant in complex online environments where consumers are often unaware who they are dealing with when they are making a purchase. Thirdly, to encourage sustainable consumption behaviors in e-commerce, drawing on insights from behavioral science, so looking at ethical considerations around digital privacy as well as transparency and that choice architecture I mentioned earlier. Fourth, to strengthen the reliability of sustainability labeling schemes, so that these are often schemes that consumers can recognize and help them to find products that comply with certain sustainability criteria. And regulation then has a role in ensuring that best practices are followed by those labelling schemes. And finally, to combat misleading sustainability claims, as has been talked about throughout this webinar. So looking at the various different tools that have been set out in the report earlier. And then just to underpin that, to support through educating consumers, governments can also enhance consumer law enforcement, so that checking of the marketplace where the challenges are, and to set up that coherent policy framework.
That's great. Thank you very much, Peter. Now I can see we've had lots of questions coming through the Q&A, and Letizia has been valiantly answering them. But there's a few I'd like to put to the panel now while we have some time. One of the themes that's emerged is the impact of regulation on small businesses, small and medium enterprises. We have a comment that it seems relatively easy to tackle greenwashing for very large enterprises, although as somebody working in enforcement, I question how easy it really is. But obviously there are particular issues for small businesses. Now, Andrea, you talked about the work that you're doing with small businesses. I wonder if you could start by saying something about what you're doing to both encourage them to comply with the law, but also ensure that you're not disproportionately affecting a business that might struggle to substantiate its claims. Oh, I think you're on mute, Andrea.
Now, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Great. Yes, well, thank you for your question. Actually, what we are prioritizing is a preventive approach. As I answered in some of the questions that popped up, we are prioritizing this preventive approach. We don't want just to sanction businesses. We want them to know the regulation. We want them to know the guidelines. We want them to know which steps they should follow to advertise their green claims. So in this regard, what we are doing is first letting them know which are their obligations. So as I mentioned, we send these informative letters. We also do a supervision, but it's not a supervision with the aim to sanction the businesses. This is a supervision to get to know the market, to get to know which are the main sectors that are using green claims to advertise their products or services. This supervision is to know which specific businesses are, advertising green claims. We have found that there are some businesses that use green claims in a frequent way. So what we have found is that in sectors, talking about sectors, personal care products are prioritizing the dissemination of green claims, also cleaners, also bags that claim to be biodegradable or compostable, for example. So in this matter, with this data, what we do is to tackle those businesses to let them know their obligations. So that would be the first thing. We are prioritizing this preventive approach, plus a supervision with the aim not to sanction, but to know the market, in order to adjust our strategy. So the second thing we do is the educational campaign that I mentioned. We use all of our channels to disseminate our guidelines. We actually had meetings with the enterprises, with industry associations, with consumers associations, to let them know our guidelines. And I mean, the guidelines are a 30-page document. So what we try to do in this meeting is in 1 hour to explain the essential points of the guidelines in an interactive way. And I would like to highlight some of the recommendations that are specified in the guidelines. So probably other authorities can also look up to. The first would be that every green claim must be substantiated. I'm sure all of us agree with that. So this is like the golden rule we always share. Everything you said must be substantiated. The second one is that be aware of and follow the specific regulations related to the environment. The third would be sustainability refers to three components: social, economic, and environmental. The fourth, be clear, prevent using claims that are vague or ambiguous. And the final one would be comparisons must be made of relevant aspects. So this is the essential message we try to communicate to our stakeholders. We also had meetings with the Ministry of Environment of Peru, so we count on them to spread the word of our guidelines. So that would be it. We, as I said, we're prioritizing this preventive approach. We try to be very close to these small businesses to get to know the regulation and the guidelines. Of course, if there are big enterprises that are always infringing the law, we do not hesitate in applying it. But as I mentioned, we are prioritizing this preventive approach, given that in Peru is kind of new, you know. So, but I'm sure we will keep supervising the market in order to prevent greenwashing for the sake of the environment and also consumers.
Thanks, Andrea. And Malgorzata, if I can come to you, and obviously the new provisions that are being put in place in the EU are quite strict in terms of pre-authorization of claims, in terms of the need for life cycle analysis. How is that going to impact on small and medium enterprises, and how should they respond?
Thank you. Of course, a very, very pertinent questions, because in the European Union and probably other countries as well, SMEs often are actually prevalent group of companies in different sectors. Some sectors more, some others less, but in any case, within our EU economy. The Green Claims Directive takes that into account. First of all, we are proposing that the smallest SMEs, so-called micro-enterprises, are actually exempted from the obligation of substantiating their claims and having them verified in line with the rules. It does not give them a license for greenwashing. They still have to comply with the horizontal rules that all claims have to be substantiated, cannot be misleading, etc. But they can take a slightly lighter approach. At the same time, within the proposal, we're also putting the responsibility on national authorities to support SMEs, to foresee specific support programs in terms of raising awareness, as also alluded to by Andrea, organizing specific trainings to make them aware of the rules, but also of the ways to comply. Also, our proposal is very much geared towards pushing companies towards reliable certification schemes. And in the situation where SMEs may find it more challenging to substantiate the claims, if they do apply for an environmental label that is compliant with the rules of the Green Claims Directive, they can make claims on the basis of the label without additional verification. So that again puts, let's say, a certain incentive for these smallest companies to use the labels rather than try to make individual claims themselves. In addition, the Commission at the EU level will also foresee some additional support for SMEs, and notably by making data lifecycle inventory data sets accessible, more widely accessible to different companies, including the SMEs. We're working on that as well. So all of that put together should help SMEs to be, on one hand, aware of the requirements, ways to comply, and also facilitate their compliance with the rules.
Thank you. And sticking with that theme of business regulation, Danica, you were arguing for regulations for businesses to prevent greenwashing and keep everybody honest. What can businesses do to motivate their governments to strengthen regulations against greenwashing, and how can businesses contribute to tackling greenwashing?
That's a very interesting question, because I feel like the only way you can do that as a social enterprise, for instance, is to show that it is possible to run a business with a triple bottom line. I feel like right now the conversation is always so polarized between one hand activists saying that no, you can't. On the other hand, you have conventional businesses whose only motivation is profit and shareholder value. And I feel like the best way that you can inspire government to legislate this, but also other businesses and consumers, is actually to prove that it is possible, that it makes business sense to be doing all these things, to have a farm to cloth the supply chain that pays living wage to the 12 families that makes each and every single garment, that to make sure that the materials that you use in that garment is grown regeneratively in ways that restore the health of the soil. Of course, on one hand, I feel like this is what all businesses should do. We need to take responsibility of all the impacts that we created just because we exist. But on the other hand, how do you then inspire governments to do that? It's just for me to show that as an Indonesian founded business, we're based in Indonesia, we're run by Indonesians. For me, this kind of talk, for instance, is a way for me to let my domestic government know that these issues matter internationally. That if you want more of your businesses to go international, these are the things that you need to start to look at. If you want your companies to be exporting to the EU, these are what they have to comply with. And that's, for me, that's the only way you can inspire the Indonesian government, for instance, to be taking action.
Thank you, Danica. So moving on to think about, we need businesses to be doing the right thing. There's no doubt about that. We need them to be doing the right thing, and we need the regulations to be there to support that. But we also obviously are trying to shift consumer behavior and patterns of consumption. And I'm wondering, Felipe, in terms of sort of generational differences, how do Gen Z and millennial consumers see the theme of greenwashing by brands and products? And how are they reacting to what's happening?
This is a very good question, Cecilia. We know that millennials and especially Gen Z, they are addicted a little bit of social networks, and they are receiving a lot of information. And here have the good part and the bad part. The good part is that they are receiving more information and more close to what's happening in the world. And the other part is that it's too many information, and sometimes no one of us know what is true and what is not. So the Gen Z especially needs to understand their role also in the future. Of course, it's something that past generations leave this hard task to them to save the world, but they can do this, and they need to have access to more transparent information. And by our research, we see that they are they don't trust so much. They have a little bit more of not confidence in the information, exactly because they are more aware about the theme. So it's a very good paradox, because the youngest generations want information. They want that companies will act, that the government will act, but they also still don't understand their role in the world. Of course, we have a big case where young generations or young girls and boys are doing something, are leading these changes, but the majority still didn't find their role in this fight that is from everybody. So we also have the role to motivate Gen Z and millennials, companies, governments, institutions, to motivate and to show to them that they can be, that they can have a big role in this fight, in combating greenwashing, in pursuit that companies will have bigger and better acts in dealing with waste, with water, with our ground, our soil, our air. So it's a big fight, and I really believe that it's with all these dialogues and the actions that we are having here, and with all this case, that we can motivate more and more people, and make that youngest generations will not be so far from this subject like the oldest generations.
Thank you, Felipe. And Peter, sticking with that sort of theme about consumer education, you talked about the importance of trust and the fact that greenwashing can really damage trust. Is it possible to educate consumers about greenwashing without harming the trust that they have in the claims that they're seeing? And do you have any examples of successful initiatives from among your membership of educating consumers on greenwashing?
It's a great question, and there are good examples out there of how to help people better understand sustainability information and maybe what to spot for. And this is where making sure we've got the credible terms in the marketplace aligned, so that the information is both credible for everyone, but also usable by consumers, so that they can compare products or services against each other and really understand which are the right ones to buy based on environmental values. However, I would just highlight that education doesn't guarantee informed choices from what we've uncovered in research. Even educated consumers, so those with the highest sort of education attainment levels, often are swayed by green claims, whether they are misleading or not. And there's no distinguish between being able to identify which is a misleading claim and which is an unmisleading claim, even at that highest level of education. So I think where there are particular programs that are underway to work with people, maybe at a grassroots level, to understand how products are made and what are the sort of challenges that do arise, can really connect people and make them more aware of maybe potentially misleading claims in the marketplace. I think these more broad brushed claims like environmentally friendly and so on can be removed from the marketplace because they're not providing that useful anchor for consumers to make purchase decisions. Numerous consumer groups out there are working to support consumers in their national jurisdictions to try to understand the challenges that irresponsible marketing can lead to misleading claims. I'd encourage everyone to have a look at Green Action Week on Consumers International's website, which highlights some of the work that is underway by many of those grassroots organisations, but also have a look at the One Planet Network Consumer Information Programme and the huge amount of resources there that can be helpful.
That's great, thank you. And we're almost coming to the end of our time, so it'd be great just to get from each of you in 30 seconds one message that you would like people to take away from this discussion on the importance of regulatory frameworks. And I realize I'm springing this on you, but Andrea, perhaps you could start.
Yes, thank you very much, Cecilia. Yes, I would like the people to take that it is important to have the regulations, but it is important also to communicate them properly to the stakeholders that are involved. The Ministry of Environment, businesses, consumers associations. So please make an effort to communicate your regulations that I'm sure you put a lot of work on, and you will get more chances to prevent greenwashing by doing so.
Thank you, Andrea. Danica, would you like to leave us with your thoughts?
Yeah, of course. So today we went so deep into all the government regulation and the need for it. But I just want to remind people at the end of the day, we also must not forget why we do this. At the end of the day, we shouldn't do something just because the government told us we should do that. But we should do something because it's the right thing to do. And that together, we can really build a world that's more beautiful and perpetual for generations to come.
Wonderful, thank you. Felipe?
Thank you very much for the invitation and for being here. I want to remember everybody that the consumer wants to be healthier and to have a more sustainable life. So it's our mission here from governments, from companies, from institutions to show the path. And this can be made by several ways. Has information, has education, has programs, projects. And when we are showing to the person that this path is better for his life, for the environment, for society, the community, for your kids, he will choose this path.
Thank you. Malgorzata?
Yes, I mean, I think what I would like to highlight at the very end is that the rules that the regulators are introducing are not only to protect consumers, and we often forget about that. They're also to protect businesses. First of all, to give them legal certainty as to what is required so that down the line, they're not challenged for unintentional greenwashing. Secondly, to really support sustainable production. Companies producing truly sustainable products should have competitive advantage over those that are not. And currently, with the greenwashing that is quite prevalent on the markets around the world, we are actually removing that competitive advantage from these truly sustainable companies. And finally, clear rules are also desperately needed for consumer protection authorities or any enforcement authorities. Because the issue with enforcement that we are facing today is that very often we are lacking clear rules, and therefore it's very difficult to prove greenwashing, even if it seems there is a case.
Thank you. And Peter, thoughts from you?
Yes, well, this is the year of elections. So globally, more voters than ever in history will be heading to the polls across the world. I think over 64 countries, representing almost half of the population of the entire planet. So a huge opportunity to really look at policy around sustainable consumption, and in particular, the case of this webinar, in terms of consumer information for sustainable consumption. So I would be encouraging everyone to really look at the report that Leticia had outlined. Particularly, can we encourage more countries to move to that level 4, where we're ensuring that sustainability information is communicated to consumers in the marketplace, and that it is credible and usable for them all.
Great, thank you. And Leticia, we'll come back to you, since it was your report that inspired us all to this webinar. Is there a final thought you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, thank you. So on my side, and also from UNEP's perspective, I'm really happy to have been hearing you and everything that each one of you at your level are doing. At UNEP level, we are looking also at the global context, and we're in a global economy with businesses selling their products in different legislation. So on our side, count on us also to try to have more alignment in between different regulations. And so we are working on this through the Consumer Information Program. And I'm also inviting all of you here to join the Consumer Information Program. And something that is not going to be easy to achieve, but what we can dream of is to have let's say a global index that we share in all countries that will inform us on the sustainability, less or more sustainability of the product. So far we have global standards, and there were a lot of questions and comments regarding eco-labels or type 1 like eco-labels. And I think those tools are really helpful in a global economy. So let's think also together. We have many challenges within each country, but also it's important to have this global look also. And that's fantastic that you all joined the discussion today.
That's terrific. Thanks very much, Leticia. Well, we're really out of time now. So it just remains for me to say, first of all, thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much to our audience for the many, many questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to more of them. If you enjoyed today's webinar, I hope you'll consider joining the next one. So the Consumer Information Programme of the One Planet Network and UNEP are doing another webinar called Sustainable Chem Talk. So this is decoding green practices in product communication in relation to the new guidelines on communicating information about chemical composition of products. It's going to bring together leading experts in consumer protection, chemicals management, and environmental sustainability to discuss the importance of providing information on chemicals and material ingredients as part of that product sustainability information. The webinar is going to be on the 27th of February from 12:30 till 2 p.m. Central European time, and the link should be appearing in the chat for you to register, and that also has information on all of the panelists. So once again, thank you very much to our panelists today. Thank you very much to our audience, and I wish you all a good rest of the day.